Human emotions. I can't. A young, seamlessly harmless girl spoke quietly to herself. Do this on my own. This young girl, appearing to be around 16 or 17, sat on a bench on top of a tall hill overlooking the city she was staying in. It was a place she discovered years ago with her two companions while exploring. At the time, she didn't care about the view or how isolated it was. All she was worried about was revenge and power. Now, on the other hand, it's a place where she came when she felt alone and sad feelings she had never had before, or when she just wanted to think or be alone. She still had her two idiots, of course, but they had each other above all. The two shared a bond and cared deeply for each other. They cared for their used-to-be leader as well, but they cared more about each other, it seemed. It was her own fault. Back when the three still had their magic and power, she pushed them around and pushed them closer. She never cared to coddle them or be a comforting figure to them. She was their leader, and that was that. Now she regretted it. She sat alone on a cliff watching over the city, only wishing she could have a bond with them or anyone as warm and strong as the one they had already. Now she had no one. At least that's how it felt. Sure, she had those two to keep her company, even if she felt lonely in theirs. They were there, and she could say they understood the way she felt. They had all gone through the same thing, with the battle of the bands and all. Each of them lost their power, their magic, their whole identity. She could say they understood, but she wasn't sure they truly did. Maybe I have them, she spoke again to no one in particular. But where are they now? Her question was asked, and short, and her tone had morphed into bitterness. The question remained open for a period of time as she thought about them, and the answer. They were home, where she left them, more than likely sleeping in each other's arms, comforting each other. Adagio let out a sigh as she looked up into the summer night sky. She reflected on her past and thought about how it was affecting her now. All of those terrible comments, and every time she didn't care how they felt. Each one of those moments pushed her into this world without a single soul she could run into. She had only pushed Aura and Sonora into each other's arms with her coldness. They had always had that special bond because of Adagio. She didn't have a special bond with them, aside from the big battle. As she looked over the city, a realization hit her. In this giant city, her reputation had been destroyed. No one in Canterlot would talk to her or her friends, and without her powers, she was unable to leave to another city, which meant she was stuck here. At least in another city, she would have a chance to find someone, anyone, that would give her the time of day or attention and comfort. With one last glance over the city, Adagio stood from the bench. It must have been late by now, but it was hard to say. She didn't have anything on her that would tell her the time. It didn't matter though. Whatever time it was useless to her, considering she had no curfew and didn't attend school. The three had tried returning to Canterlot High after the event that took place. Celestia told them they were allowed if they wished, but to put it simply, it just didn't work out very well, and they stopped after the first day. Sonora, on the other hand, went a full week, before she gave up. Adagio found the trail that led her up to the small mountain and began her journey down it. It was a short trip down. The lookout wasn't far from where she was staying, and she was grateful for that. She found herself halfway down the trail when she heard footsteps. This drew her off guard since she never saw anyone else at the lookout. For some reason, it never had visitors, at least not when Adagio visited. Part of her didn't mind. It was nice being alone. A different part of her wished another lonely soul came to the lookout. A different part of her wished another lonely soul came to the lookout. She could talk to them, and everything would go downhill from there. And tonight could be the night. Curious, she continued walking and rounded the curve of the trail. Then she and the person froze as their eyes met. Adagio's surprise immediately changed to anger, and she narrowed her eyes. Her insides boiled with hatred as she stared into the eyes of the girl that ripped everything away from her. Sunset shimmer. Sunset stared back at Adagio. Her surprise stayed longer than Adagio's, and she appeared much more nervous, but she held herself together and composed. The flamed-haired girl started. Adagio asked shortly. What are you doing out here? She asked slowly, as if she wasn't sure what she was asking. The ex-siren scoffed. Oh, please, like you really want to know. Well, I do. Sunset's answer took Adagio off guard. She expected anything besides a friendly response from her. Trying to compose herself, she quickly shot out. Okay, well, what are you doing out here? Sunset started. Her eyes made a curved motion from the sky to the trees, then to the ground, trying to find a way to answer. Adagio remained quiet and waited for her. Honestly, she wanted to know why Sunset would be all the way out here all alone. Wait. You definitely don't care, so... The fiery-haired girl's voice trailed off as she turned her head and gave a sideways look. She was right, or she would have been. Any time before the battle, Adagio wouldn't have cared why Sunny was up here so late. However, ever since then, she's had new feelings, emotions, and thoughts, and tonight she did care. She hated Sunset and her friend, but Adagio knew that if anyone in this god-forsaken town would spare her a second glance, it would be Sunset, and she was going to work with it. Well, if we're done here, then I'm just going to, Sunset said as she pointed past the former leader of the Dazzlings and stepped forward, only to be cut off by her, standing just a hair from being uncomfortably close. No, she said with a smirk and that sultry voice of hers. I do care, Sunset. Sunset took a step back and crinkled her brow in confusion at the ex-siren. She studied Adagio and her expression. It was hard to read, and it was even harder to tell if she was sincere or not. She continued on anyways. I'd like to get away from the noise. The noise? She cocked a brow. Yes, the noise. The noise of the city, of my friends, of my own thoughts. Adagio scoffed again. The of my own thoughts part sounded too dramatic. who comes to a place alone to get rid of their own thoughts? Well, actually, that was the exact same thing she was doing. Something inside the former leader clicked. Sunset knows what it feels like. She understands. Sunset groaned. If you're just going to scoff at me, then why did you say you cared? She was pulled from her thoughts and looked back up to Sunset. The words were heard, but they took a few seconds to register that she was asked a question. The sultry tone in her voice was gone now, and her expression was more serious. I can sort of relate. Oh, Sunset scratched the back of her head. Can I ask what you're doing then? The former leader looked back at the bit of the bench she could still see, then turned back to Sunset. I was doing the same thing. There was a silence between them. Sunset stared at Adagio, possibly taking in her words, trying to wrap her mind around the idea of that former siren. Big bad Adagio needed time away from herself. Adagio stared back. She stared into Sunset's eyes. They were warm, caring, and, most importantly, understanding. For the first time since the big event, Adagio felt something other than hatred. Anger, sadness, and loneliness. What was it? She couldn't quite say. All she knew was that one of the people that ripped everything away from her was here, showing her kindness. Not much kindness, but it was better than none at all. Are you going home? Sunset finally broke the silence. I was about to. Do you need to be home? Adagio gave a short but pained laugh. No, I don't. Would you like to go up there with me? Sunset took the siren off guard once more. She stared back at her flame-haired enemy, or used to be enemy. She stared back at her, into her eyes again, studied her face, searched for any sign of a lie. Nothing. As far as Adagio could see, everything in Sunset was sincere. But regardless, she gave the question an answer serious, though. Sunset and her friend stole everything from her. She wanted to hate her. She wanted to go with her too. Though, this is exactly what Adagio had been waiting for. And she wasn't going to let it slip by because of who it was. I can, she finally answered, making sure she sounded indifferent. Great, Sunny responded with a smile, then gestured towards the bench. Let's go then, she said as she walked past Adagio. They sat on the bench, a fair distance away from each other. They did the same thing Adagio did only moments ago, sat in silence watching over the city. Only now, she wasn't alone. And though she would never admit it, she loved every second of it. Her eyes moved to the sky and watched the stars twinkle. Her mind wasn't lost in her old, sad thoughts. Now she wondered what Sunset was thinking. What was on her mind? Was she wondering the same thing? And would they talk? Or only sit in silence? How are things? The former she-demon finally spoke while giving her used-to-be enemy a sidelong glance. Adagio looked to Sunset, then out to the city before giving her an answer. They've been better, she said, trying her hardest to keep the bitterness out of her voice. Yeah, I've been here. Yeah, I've been there. It doesn't last forever. The dazzling looked back at Sunset, but remained silent, waiting for her to continue. That night, fall formal, everything changed. I changed. I had everything. Power, social status, 2 underclassmen that did whatever I said. I started drama, split everyone apart, and relished in the hatred everyone had. Princess Twilight came and tore down everything I built up. Sunset paused. They blasted me with a rainbow too, and that's when everything came crashing down on me. Everything hit me at once. Shame, loneliness, guilt, sadness, anger, you name it. Adagio remained quietly. She took in everything Sunset was telling her and related to. It was spot on, really. Their eyes met, and the ex-leader noticed tears had formed in Sunset's eyes. She almost asked why she was crying, but stopped herself, knowing obvious answers. It was worth a bet that she didn't have anyone to talk to about all of this either. At that moment, but she felt something for Sunset. She didn't know what, but she knew it wasn't hatred. It doesn't last forever. Sunset had said that just moments ago. It was a weird thought, knowing Sunset went through the same thing. It almost made Adagio hate the Rainbooms more for putting her through it too. Almost. She said it didn't last forever. And she was obviously right. Here was Sunset Shimmer, trying to help people. Trying to help someone going through the same thing. She was alive and, well, whatever she went through, she made it out of it fine. And she's in a much better place now. Mainly because of the Rainbooms. They gave her friendship and helped her get through it. From what Dojo saw, they sucked at helping Sunset with anything other than friendship. Even with that, they were still sort of bad at it. It was funny. Adagio had been waiting for this. Not someone to relate to, but to meet with one of those rainbow freaks, one-on-one. She just wanted to let them know how much they took from them. Their magic, the only connection they had left to their old home. If she couldn't use her magic against them, maybe she could at least make them sick with guilt. It was petty and pathetic, but the siren turned human would take what she could. But now, here with Sunset, she had both that she had been waiting for. Only she didn't want to make Sunset sick with guilt, or tell her how much they ruined the Dazzling's lives. This understanding and caring girl sitting beside Adagio already was sick with guilt and knew already how it felt to have her life destroyed. Back in the hallway before the big showcase, the Dazzlings had circled Shimmer, and they had made her feel terrible. That was the goal. They succeeded, of course. Hey, the fluffy-haired girl finally spoke, drawing in Sunset's attention. I'm sorry. When the girls and I circled you like sharks in the dim-lit hallway, Teal eyes widened slightly. Right then, as Sunset looked into the siren's eyes, Doja knew no one had apologized to her. Not sincerely, anyways. How many times has she apologized to someone, or everyone? How many times was she accepted or rejected? Besides her friends, had anyone accepted her apologies? When Adagio went to cancel how hard the students treated Sunset, about as bad as they treat the sirens now. Thanks, Adagio. she said. That means a lot. It's alright, Adagio asked. Apology accepted? Sunset let out a soft laugh. Yeah, apology accepted. Another silence found its way between the two again. This time Adagio-san studied Sunset's profile and her features. The moves wasn't very bright, but it was bright enough to illuminate the night so that they could see each other. She wondered how someone so caring and kind could go and dominate a school. Well, scratch that. She knew. When a person wants something, there's the option to get it. But then there's the option to make sure you get it. So, why did Adagio started, but was cut off by Sunset's phone ringing. I'm sorry, she said as she pulled her phone out of her pocket. Can I? Adagio gestured with her hand to let her know that she could answer it. The flaming-haired girl stood from the bench and walked a few feet away from it. The former siren tried to listen, but she was unable to make any words out. Instead, she looked back out over the city as she did before she could get lost in her thoughts. Sunset walked back over to the bench, but she continued to stand rather than sit. That was Rainbow Dash, she says. That there's some sort of emergency, and I need to rush over to Pinkie Pie's. Sunset explained bluntly. Adagio turned to look at her, disappointment settling into her stomach and sadness returning to her chest, but didn't show on her face. So, you're going? Yeah, she rubbed the back of her neck. Maybe I'll see you around sometime? She gave an apologetic smile. Adagio stood. I'll need to be getting home to my idiots soon anyways. Alright, see you then, Sunset said with a small wave before she ran off down the trail. See ya, the former siren said softly as she sat back on the bench. She had nowhere to be and no one to see. That was where she and Sunset differed. Sunset had friends and she had places to go. Adagio gave a soft sigh and looked up at the sky.